The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the Arizona desert in hues of crimson and gold. As Olivia Ellis stumbled forward, her hands bloody and raw from the shovel she'd been forced to wield for hours. The year was 1877, and death loomed as certain as the setting sun. Her once pristine blue dress was now torn and stained with dirt, sweat, and tears that had long since dried on her dust-covered cheeks. Behind her stood three men, their expressions as cold and unforgiving as the barrels of the guns they kept trained on her slender back. "Deeper," the tallest one snarled, kicking a loose stone into the shallow pit she'd managed to dig in the hard desert earth. "You think this'll hold you, girl? Dig deeper." Olivia's arms trembled with exhaustion as she plunged the shovel back into the ground. She'd been traveling to Tucson to start a new life as a schoolteacher when the stagecoach was ambushed. The other passengers were shot immediately, but these men had other plans for her plans that made her wish they'd just killed her outright. Now, after hours of unimaginable degradation, they were making her dig her own grave. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I have family waiting. They'll be looking for me." The short, squat man with a scar running down his face laughed. "Ain't nobody gonna find nothing but bones out here, lady, if they find you at all." The third man, younger than the others but with eyes just as cruel, checked the position of the sun. "Hurry it up. I want to make Silverdale by nightfall." Olivia's legs gave out and she fell to her knees in the shallow hole. 4 feet long, 3 feet wide, and barely 2 feet deep. Not much of a grave, but it would be enough once they put bullets in her head. "I can't," she sobbed, shoulders shaking. "I can't dig anymore." The tall man raised his gun. "Then I reckon we're done here." The sound of a rifle cocking cut through the desert silence, but it hadn't come from any of the three men. They whirled around, weapons halfway raised, to find themselves staring down the barrel of a Winchester rifle held by a tall figure on horseback. "I'd reconsider that if I were you," said the rider, his voice calm but carrying an edge sharper than any knife. The tall outlaw sneered. "Mind your business, cowboy, this ain't your concern. 3 men forcing a woman to dig her own grave." The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, keeping his rifle steady. "I'm making it my concern." In the fading light, Olivia could finally see her potential savior clearly. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, a dark hat pulled low over his brow and a star-shaped badge pinned to his leather vest. "Who the hell are you?" demanded the scarred man. "Name's Grant Patterson." "I'm the new Marshal of Silverdale." His eyes flicked briefly to Olivia before returning to the men. "And you boys are in a heap of trouble." What happened next would forever be seared into Olivia's memory. The tall outlaw made the mistake of trying to shoot first. Marshal Patterson's rifle barked once, and the man crumpled to the ground. The young outlaw dropped his gun immediately, hands flying upward, but the scarred man turned and fired a wild shot toward Olivia. The bullet kicked up dirt inches from her face. Before the man could fire again, 2 more shots rang out and he fell backward, clutching his chest. The young outlaw was on his knees now, begging for mercy. "Please, Marshal, I was just following orders. I didn't want no part in hurting the lady." Patterson kept his rifle aimed at the young man's head. "Toss that gun away and lie face down, hands behind your back." As the surviving outlaw complied, Patterson cautiously approached the shallow grave. Olivia looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. "They made me dig my grave," she cried, her voice breaking on each word. The marshal's expression softened as he extended a hand toward her. "Then I'll fill it with flowers instead," he said gently. Trembling, Olivia took his hand, allowing him to help her out of the pit. Her legs nearly gave way, and he steadied her with a firm but gentle grip. "I've got you, miss. You're safe now." She swayed against him, the reality of her survival washing over her in waves. "I thought I was going to die," she whispered. "Not today," he replied, then guided her to sit on a nearby rock. "Let me take care of this vermin, and then we'll get you somewhere safe." Patterson efficiently bound the young outlaw's hands with rope from his saddlebag, then checked the other two men. The tall one was dead, but the scarred man was still breathing, though barely. After ensuring the wounded man wouldn't be going anywhere, he turned his attention back to Olivia. "What's your name, miss?" "Olivia Ellis," she managed, trying to brush some of the dirt from her torn dress. "I was traveling to Tucson for a teaching position." The marshal nodded, his eyes kind despite their steely color. "Well, Miss Ellis, Silverdale's just about 3 hours' ride from here. There's a doctor there who can look you over and a hotel where you can rest." "The other passengers," she said suddenly, remembering. "On the stagecoach, they shot them all." "Where did this happen?" Olivia pointed vaguely eastward, maybe 5 miles that way, near a stand of cottonwoods by a dry creek bed. Patterson nodded grimly. "I'll send men to recover the bodies once I get you and this piece of garbage to town." He glanced at the shallow grave. "As for this..." He pulled a small leather pouch from his saddlebag and walked to his horse, retrieving a canteen. To Olivia's bewilderment, he emptied the contents of the pouch into his palm seeds and scattered them into the hole she'd dug. Then he poured water from his canteen over them. "Desert marigolds," he explained, catching her confused look. "They'll bloom after the next rain." "Seems a better use for a hole in the ground, don't you think?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips for the first time. "Yes, much better. Can you ride?" he asked. Olivia nodded. Though exhausted and traumatized, she'd grown up riding horses on her father's farm in Missouri. "Good." "You'll take my horse. I'll walk alongside and lead him." He glanced at the surviving outlaw. "Our friend here will walk in front where I can see him." The journey to Silverdale was slow and uncomfortable. The young outlaw, who sullenly identified himself as Billy Rowe, trudged ahead with his hands bound behind his back. Marshal Patterson led his horse, a sturdy palomino named Challenger, on which Olivia rode. The scarred outlaw, Jeremiah Tate, according to Rowe, had died before they departed, his body lashed to his own horse. Olivia watched the marshal as they traveled. Despite the gathering darkness, he maintained a vigilant watch, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Occasionally, he would glance up at her with concern. "How are you holding up, Miss Ellis?" "I'm alive," she replied simply. "Thanks to you, just doing my job." "Is that what brought you out this way, your job?" he nodded. "Got word that the Wilson gang might be operating in this territory." "Seems I found them." "The Wilson gang," Olivia repeated. "Is that who they were?" "Based on the description of that scar-faced fellow, yes. They've been robbing stage coaches and trains across 3 territories." He looked up at her again. "You're lucky I happened along when I did." Lucky didn't begin to describe it, Olivia thought. Divine intervention felt more accurate. It was well past midnight when they reached Silverdale, a modest but growing settlement nestled in a valley. Despite the late hour, their arrival caused a stir. Lights appeared in windows, and a few curious residents emerged onto their porches as the marshal led the small procession down the main street. They stopped first at the doctor's house, a white clapboard structure with green shutters. Dr. Samuel Moore, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a bushy gray beard, answered the door in his nightshirt, quickly ushering Olivia inside while Patterson took Rowe to the jailhouse. "I'll come check on you in the morning, Miss Ellis," the marshal promised before departing. The doctor's wife, Martha, took one look at Olivia's condition and immediately prepared a hot bath. As Olivia soaked her aching body in the warm water, washing away the dirt and blood, she finally allowed herself to cry not the desperate sobs of someone facing death, but the relieved tears of one who has been unexpectedly granted life. After the bath, Martha provided a clean nightgown and showed Olivia to a spare room. "You rest now, dear," the older woman said kindly. "Everything looks better in the morning." Exhausted beyond measure, Olivia fell into a deep sleep the moment her head touched the pillow. She dreamed of desert marigolds blooming in a grave meant for her. The next morning, Marshal Patterson returned as promised, looking fresh despite the long night. He found Olivia sitting at the doctor's kitchen table, dressed in a simple blue dress borrowed from the doctor's daughter. "Miss Ellis," he greeted, removing his hat as he entered. "You're looking much improved," she offered a small smile. "Thanks to Dr. Moore and Mrs. Moore's kindness, and yours, of course. I've sent a telegram to the authorities in Tucson informing them of what happened. They'll notify the stagecoach company." He hesitated. "I also took the liberty of asking about that teaching position you mentioned." Olivia looked up with interest. "And, the school term's already begun, they hired someone else when you didn't arrive." He saw her face fall and quickly added, "But as it happens, Silverdale is in need of a schoolteacher. Our previous one left last month to get married." "Are you offering me a job, Marshal Patterson?" The town council is. "I just mentioned that I happen to rescue a qualified teacher." He smiled. "It's not as big as Tucson, but it's a good town with good people." Olivia considered the offer. She had no particular attachment to Tucson. She'd chosen it simply because the position was available, and after what she'd experienced, the idea of continuing her journey alone held little appeal. "I'd like to meet this town council before deciding," she said. "Of course, they're eager to meet you as well." He hesitated again. "There's one more thing. Billy Rowe has been talking. Seems he wants to make a deal to avoid the noose." "What kind of deal?" "He's offering to testify against other members of the Wilson gang who weren't with them yesterday. Says he knows where they're hiding out." The marshal studied her face. "He's also asked to speak with you, says he wants to apologize." Olivia felt her stomach clench. The thought of facing one of her tormentors made her feel ill, but she was no coward. "I'll speak with him. Not today, but soon." Patterson nodded approvingly. "Take your time. He's not going anywhere." Over the following days, Olivia slowly regained her strength and composure. The town of Silverdale embraced her with open arms once they heard her story. The hotel owner insisted she stay free of charge until she found permanent lodgings, and several families invited her to dinner. She met with the town council, a collection of business owners and respected citizens, who officially offered her the teaching position. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building that served about 20 children of various ages, but it was well maintained and stocked with decent supplies. "We value education here," explained Mrs. Harriet Wheeler, the dressmaker who sat on the council. "My husband and I donated the land for the school ourselves." Olivia accepted the position, grateful for the opportunity and the distraction it provided from her traumatic experience. The first day of teaching was challenging. The children were curious about the new teacher and full of energy, but by the end of the week, she'd established a routine and earned their respect. Throughout this time, Marshal Patterson kept a watchful eye on her from a respectful distance. He would tip his hat when they passed on the street and occasionally stop by the schoolhouse after hours to ask how she was settling in. There was something in his gray eyes that made Olivia's heart beat a little faster, though she tried to dismiss it as mere gratitude for her rescue. A week after her arrival in Silverdale, Olivia finally felt ready to face Billy Rowe. Marshal Patterson escorted her to the jailhouse, his presence a reassuring comfort. "I'll be right outside the cell the whole time," he assured her. "Say the word and we leave." Rowe looked smaller somehow, hunched on his cot in the corner of the cell. He stood when Olivia entered, his eyes downcast. "Miss Ellis," he said softly, "thank you for coming." "Marshal Patterson says you wanted to apologize," she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Yes, madam." He finally looked up, his young face haggard with regret. "I ain't asking for forgiveness. What I let them do to you ain't forgivable, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I was weak. Should have stood up to Tate and Wilson instead of going along." Olivia studied him. He couldn't be more than 20, hardly older than some of her students. "Why did you join them in the first place?" "Thought I wanted to be somebody important. Thought riding with notorious outlaws would make me somebody." He laughed bitterly. "All it made me was a monster." "You're young, Mr. Rowe. Perhaps you can still make something better of yourself, maybe in prison." He glanced at Patterson. "Marshal says if I help catch the rest of the gang, the judge might be lenient." Olivia nodded slowly. "I hope that's true." She turned to leave, then paused. "Mr. Rowe, I may never forgive what happened, but I'm glad you're trying to make amends." Outside the jailhouse, Olivia took a deep breath of fresh air. Grant watched her with concern. "You all right?" "Yes," she said, surprised to find it was true. "I think I needed that. To see him as a person, not just a nightmare." "You're a remarkable woman, Olivia Ellis," Grant said quietly, using her first name for the first time. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the connection that had been growing since that terrible day in the desert. "Would you accompany me on a ride tomorrow?" he asked suddenly. "There's something I'd like to show you." Curious, Olivia agreed. The next day was Saturday, so she had no school duties. Grant arrived at the hotel promptly at 9, leading 2 horses, his palomino and a gentle bay mare. "Where are we going?" she asked as they rode out of town. "You'll see," he replied mysteriously. They rode for about 2 hours, following a winding trail into the foothills. The desert landscape was beautiful in the morning light, with saguaro cacti standing like sentinels against the blue sky. Eventually, they reached a small plateau overlooking a valley. "This is my favorite spot," Grant said as they dismounted. "Best view in the territory." Olivia had to agree. The vista before them was breathtaking, mountains in the distance, the desert floor spreading out below, and Silverdale visible as a cluster of buildings far to the east. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "There's more." He led her to the edge of the plateau where, to her astonishment, a blanket of yellow flowers covered the ground. "Desert marigolds," she whispered, recognizing them from the seeds he'd planted in her would be grave. Nature's promise that beauty can grow anywhere, even in the harshest conditions. He turned to her, his expression serious. "Like the strength I see in you, Olivia," she felt herself blush, "you give me too much credit." "I don't think I give you enough." He gestured to a flat rock where he'd spread a blanket. "I brought lunch if you're hungry." They shared a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried fruit, talking easily about their lives before Silverdale. Grant had grown up in Colorado, the son of a rancher. He'd fought briefly in the war before becoming a lawman. "What made you choose to be a marshal?" Olivia asked. "Saw too many good people hurt by those who thought they were above the law," he replied. "Figured somebody had to stand for justice." "Like you did for me," he nodded, his eyes holding hers. "Like I did for you." As they rode back to town, Olivia felt lighter than she had in weeks. Something was blooming between them, something as unexpected and beautiful as marigolds in a grave. Over the next month, Olivia settled fully into life in Silverdale. She found a small house to rent, decorated it with simple furnishings, and established herself as a respected teacher. The children adored her, and their parents appreciated her dedication. Grant became a regular visitor, often bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, flowers from his infrequent travels, or fresh bread from the bakery. They would sit on her porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing as the sun set over the desert. The people of Silverdale watched their courtship with approving eyes. The handsome marshal and the brave schoolteacher seemed a perfect match, their growing love a testament to the good that could come even from the darkest circumstances. Then, 6 weeks after Olivia's arrival in Silverdale, everything changed. Billy Rowe's information had led to the capture of 3 more members of the Wilson gang. But their leader, Samuel Wilson, the tall man Grant had shot that day in the desert, had a brother. James Wilson was even more ruthless than his sibling, and when news reached him of Samuel's death, he swore vengeance on both Grant Patterson and the woman who had witnessed his brother's demise. The warning came from a friendly saloon owner in a neighboring town who'd overheard drunk outlaws discussing Wilson's plans. Grant immediately increased patrols around Silverdale and assigned a deputy to watch the schoolhouse during the day. "I won't let him hurt you," he promised Olivia as they sat in her kitchen one evening. "But you need to be careful. No traveling alone, no staying at the schoolhouse after dark." "I won't live in fear, Grant," she said firmly. "I've faced death once already. It holds less terror for me now." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. It holds more terror for me, thinking of you in danger. Their eyes met, and Olivia saw raw emotion in his gaze. Grant, I love you, Olivia, he said simply. I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you in that God-forsaken hole in the ground, refusing to give up despite everything those men had done. Her heart swelled with joy. I love you too, she whispered. You filled my grave with flowers and my heart with hope. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise of all that could be. When Grant finally left that night, Olivia stood in her doorway watching him walk down the street, her fingertips touching her lips where his had been. For 2 weeks, there was no sign of James Wilson or his men. Life continued in Silverdale, though with an undercurrent of tension. Grant and Olivia's romance blossomed despite the threat hanging over them. He began talking of marriage, of building a future together. Once Wilson is caught, he said, we'll have nothing standing in our way. But Wilson made his move before Grant could catch him. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon as Olivia was walking home from school. Despite Grant's warnings, she'd stayed late to prepare lessons, and the deputy assigned to watch the school had been called away to help with a dispute at the livery stable. She was halfway home when a wagon pulled up beside her, driven by a man she didn't recognize. Before she could react, a cloth was pressed over her face and darkness claimed her. When Olivia regained consciousness, she was in an abandoned mine shaft, her hands tied behind her back and her ankles bound together. A lantern cast eerie shadows on the rock walls, and sitting across from her was a man who could only be James Wilson. He had the same cold eyes as his brother. Finally awake, are we? He drawled. Was beginning to think Jenkins used too much chloroform. What do you want from me? Olivia asked, her mouth dry with fear. Want? Wilson laughed. I want Patterson to suffer like I've suffered. He took my brother, so I'm taking what matters most to him. He leaned forward. That's you, schoolteacher. He'll find me, she said with more confidence than she felt. Oh, I'm counting on it, Wilson grinned. But he'll be too late to save you, and he'll live with that failure for the rest of his miserable life. Olivia assessed her situation. The mine shaft appeared old but stable, with wooden supports holding up the ceiling. A single entrance was visible, beyond which she could see only darkness. 2 men stood guard near the entrance, and she could hear others moving about further inside the mine. How many men do you have? She asked, hoping to gauge the odds. Wilson chuckled. Enough to deal with one love-struck marshal, if that's what you're wondering. Olivia knew she needed to stay calm and look for opportunities. Grant would be searching for her, of that she had no doubt, but she couldn't rely solely on rescue. Her students had been learning about famous escapes in history just last week. Now she needed to apply those lessons herself. Hours passed. Wilson left her alone in the chamber, though guards remained at the entrance. Olivia worked at her bonds, rubbing the rope against a sharp edge of rock she'd discovered behind her. Progress was painfully slow, but the rope gradually began to fray. Meanwhile, in Silverdale, Grant was frantic. When Olivia failed to return home, he organized a search party immediately. They found signs of a struggle on the road and tracks leading west toward the mountains, where several abandoned mining claims were located by dawn. Grant had assembled a posse of trusted men, including the town's best tracker. They rode hard, following the trail left by Wilson's men, who had made little effort to conceal their passage. They want us to follow, Grant realized grimly. It's a trap. What do we do, Marshal? Asked one of his deputies. Spring it, Grant replied, but on our terms. At the mine, Olivia had managed to free her hands just as the first light of dawn filtered through the entrance. She quickly untied her ankles but remained sitting as if still bound. When one of the guards brought her water, she made her move. Years of handling unruly students had taught her to be quicker than expected. She flung the cup of water into the guard's face, then drove her fist into his throat as he gasped in surprise. Grabbing his pistol as he fell, she struck him hard across the temple with it, rendering him unconscious. Heart pounding, she crept toward the entrance, only to freeze at the sound of voices approaching. Wilson and 3 men were returning. Olivia retreated, hiding behind a stack of old mining equipment, the stolen pistol clutched in her trembling hands. "Time to move her," Wilson was saying as they entered. Patterson's posse was spotted near. He stopped abruptly, seeing the unconscious guard and the empty spot where Olivia had been. "Find her," he roared. "She's still in here somewhere." As the men spread out to search, gunfire suddenly erupted from outside the mine. Wilson cursed, drawing his gun. "That's Patterson. Two of you keep looking for the woman. Jenkins, with me." As Wilson and one man rushed toward the entrance, Olivia seized her chance. She stepped out from her hiding place and fired at the two men searching for her. Her first shot went wide, but the second struck one in the leg. The other whirled and fired back, the bullet splintering wood inches from her head. Outside, Grant and his posse had split into two groups, attacking from different angles to divide Wilson's forces. Grant himself was working his way toward the mine entrance, determined to reach Olivia. Inside, Olivia ducked behind a support beam as bullets flew around her. The injured man was down, but his companion kept firing, forcing her to remain in cover. Then she heard a familiar voice calling her name. "Olivia, where are you?" "Grant, back chamber," she shouted, relief flooding through her. More gunfire, a cry of pain, and then Grant appeared in the entrance to the chamber, his face smudged with dirt and gunpowder but his eyes bright with determination. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, rushing to her side. "No, I'm all right, but Wilson is dead," Grant finished grimly. "He tried to ambush us from the ridge, but we were ready for him." Olivia sagged against him, the stolen pistol falling from her suddenly nerveless fingers. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. He held her tightly. "Always," he promised. "Always." The ride back to Silverdale was triumphant. 3 of Wilson's men had been killed, including Wilson himself, and 4 more captured. Olivia rode double with Grant, his arms around her as he held the reins, her back pressed against his chest in a closeness that spoke of their unwillingness to be separated even for a moment. News of their return spread quickly, and by the time they reached town, it seemed everyone was out to greet them. The mayor declared an impromptu celebration, and that evening, the saloon hosted a gathering in honor of the brave schoolteacher and the marshal who had eliminated the Wilson gang for good. As music played and people danced, Grant led Olivia outside to the quiet of the street. In the silvery moonlight, he dropped to one knee, a small box in his hand. "Olivia Ellis, I promised to fill your grave with flowers instead of letting you die in it. Now I want to fill your life with love instead of fear. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Grant." Yes. The ring was simple, a gold band with a small diamond, but to Olivia, it was perfect. As he slid it onto her finger, cheers erupted from the saloon doorway where the townspeople had gathered to witness the proposal. They were married 2 weeks later in the town church, the entire community in attendance. Olivia wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Wheeler had made especially for the occasion, and Grant looked handsome in a new black suit. Even Billy Rowe, under guard and awaiting transfer to a territorial prison, was allowed to attend as a gesture of reconciliation. After the ceremony, Grant surprised Olivia by taking her to a plot of land just outside town, 15 acres with a view of the mountains and a small but sturdy house already built. "Welcome home, Mrs. Patterson," he said, lifting her from the wagon. "When did you do all this?" she asked in wonder. "I bought the land the day after I met you," he admitted. "Started building the house a week later. I know it was presumptuous." She silenced him with a kiss. "It was hopeful, and hope is what you've given me from the start." As they stood on the porch of their new home, Olivia noticed something in the distance, a splash of yellow against the desert brown. Walking closer, she realized what it was. A patch of desert marigolds, blooming bright and strong in the harsh landscape. "I planted them for you," Grant said softly, coming to stand beside her, "to remind us both that beauty can grow from the darkest moments." Olivia turned to her husband, her heart full. "They made me dig my grave," she said, echoing her words from that fateful day. Grant smiled, gathering her into his arms. and I'll spend the rest of my life filling it with flowers instead." 5 years later, the Patterson home was filled with laughter. Olivia continued teaching at the school, though now she brought along her 3-year-old daughter, Emma, who sat quietly drawing while her mother taught. Grant had been elected sheriff of the expanding county, a position that kept him busy but allowed him to return home most nights. The patch of desert marigolds had spread, now covering nearly an acre. Every spring, Olivia would take Emma to see the flowers, telling her the story of how she met her father, a simplified version, of course, suitable for a child's ears. "Daddy saved you from bad men," Emma would say. "Yes, he did," Olivia would agree. "And then he filled my life with love and flowers." On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Grant took Olivia back to the plateau where he had first shown her the desert marigolds. As they stood watching the sunset, he handed her a small wooden box. Inside lay a gold locket. When she opened it, she found a pressed desert marigold on one side and a tiny portrait of Emma on the other. "To remind you always," Grant said, "that life can bring unexpected beauty even after the darkest days." Olivia looked up at her husband, the man who had saved her in more ways than one, and felt the fullness of her heart might overflow. From the horror of digging her own grave had come this life of love and purpose, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of love. "I don't need reminders," she said softly. "I have you and Emma. You are my flowers, my beauty after darkness." As they rode home in the gathering twilight, Olivia looked back once at the plateau where marigolds bloomed against all odds. Like those hardy flowers, she had found a way to not just survive but thrive in the sometimes harsh landscape of life. And with Grant by her side, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, turning graves into gardens, one day at a time.